All right, hello. It's Juho Websalainen here from React Finland Vodcast, and this time we will discuss Next.js. And for this purpose, I found 3 speakers as usual. So we have Pedro. Maybe you can say hi to people.
Hello.
We have Cassidy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
And yeah, great to have you here. And David.
Hi.
So maybe we can do a brief round of introduction. So as you likely know, I'm the director of React Finland, and I organize these things and good friends. So maybe David, maybe you can tell something about yourself or what you do and this kind of stuff.
Okay. I'm a web developer myself for 25 years. The last 10 years, I am the CEO of Trigo, a company based in Vienna, Austria. And we do a lot of web development stuff for small and medium businesses.
Cool. And Cassidy?
My name is Cassidy Williams. I'm a principal developer experience engineer at Netlify, and I make a lot of memes on the internet. I code a lot too, but the jokes are more fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everyone has seen those here. So that's really cool stuff. And then we have Pedro.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pedro. I'm a software engineer at blockchain.com. And yeah, I like to do stuff, I guess.
All right. So we have 3 demonstrations about Next.js. But before we jump to demonstrations, maybe we'll discuss Next.js a little bit. So, I mean, how do you use Next.js yourself? What's your use case for Next? Or can you just describe why do you use Next and how do you use it?
For blockchain.com, we use Next.js for everything that is public. So for everything that has to be crawlable, for example, so we have to rank high on Google and we have to perform very well for Web Vitals and things like that. We usually use Next.js. That's our go-to. And yeah, basically that's it. Everything that is public and has to be fast and performant and crawlable, we use Next.js for.
Cool. And Cassidy, maybe you can tell about your usage of Next.js.
Yeah, and so I use Next.js on personal projects, and then we also use it at work as well. And so on personal projects, I mostly dabble with it if I don't want to set up a whole routing system and stuff myself. I think it kind of comes down to routing, where Next became popular because of the server-side routing, and now especially with the static site generation being more of a first-class citizen, it's been really cool with that too. At Netlify in particular, we have a hodgepodge of a lot of different frameworks depending on where you're entering the site. Some parts of the site are Vue and 11t, some parts of the site are React and Redux, and then some site properties are Next.js. One, for example, I'll plop it in the chat there, is explorers.netlify.com. That's a learning website that we built entirely in Next.js. And you can also learn Next.js on the site. So heyo, and that's a free learning site we made with that. And so I really like using Next when I don't want to deal with setting up with routing. Then that's kind of the very high level summary, because in general I like writing React.
That makes sense. I think Next it gives you nice balance between doing static sites and something that's more dynamic. Mm-hmm. And maybe David, maybe you can tell something about your usage of Next.js.
It's a mix of both of your reasons. For all of our public assets, like our website, we use it because it's super fast and it's convenient. But also on our client projects, I mean, we went through every framework you can imagine, setting everything up by ourselves, all the webpack stuff, all the routing stuff, everything. And came to the conclusion that this is so much mental load for every one of us, and we want to focus on the value we generate for our clients, and therefore we settled with Next.js. With all their ups and downs, but it's just, I mean, it works out of the box, and we can focus on the apps itself. So that's the reason why we moved there.
Yeah, makes sense, because it comes with a lot of opinions you don't have to worry about. And as you mentioned, it has pros and cons, but I think we will learn more after the demos. So I guess it's time to move to the first demonstration by Pedro. So the stage is yours.
Oh, mine. All right, let me share my screen here. So here, share. So basically, what I'd like to show is one thing that is very weird about Next.js and the way that it works is that it was created by a serverless company, and it was created to be used on serverless servers, on serverless apps. Meaning that there is not a bunch of documentation about things that how to optimize it on a server, or how to even customize the API that it provides to you, because Next.js, if I'm not mistaken, is written like under the hood. It uses Express and a bunch of other things. So if you customize it, you're gonna have to work with Express routes and etc. So at blockchain.com, we use it for our Explorer application, and I'm gonna explain a little bit more about it. I'm Pedro, software engineer at blockchain.com. And first of all, SSR is a blessing, but what is server-side rendering? Basically, to understand it, you basically render the application on the server and present it on the client. And to demonstrate it, I opened a web app that is basically an Angular app, I guess. And actually, it's client-side rendered, meaning that when you first, and it's pretty nice, when you first receive the, you first get the request URL, you receive a kinda empty HTML page. So the response comes with an empty app root tag, and everything that you render on your AngularJS, Next.js, AngularJS React app, whatever, it renders on this tag. Next.js, in other hand, what it gives you is that it takes this rendering that it would happen on the client, and it does it on the server. So it gives you actually the page entirely. I'm going to refresh it here to show. It gives you the page entirely on the yeah, I hate to preserve the log. Refresh again, and then here the first request should be the, and I can't find it. All right, let's go to blockchain.com/ it's not showing. That's cool. I have to find the, all right, let me open it on the new tab. It always happens on live, so not even bothered about
demo
it.
effect.
So, right, the first request, all right, that it is. So you can see that the first request actually gets a bunch of styles and actually a bunch of HTML. If you go,
can you zoom a little bit so we can improve the quality of the feed?
Sure. So I'm gonna here and then zoom in a little bit. Actually, the zoom only works for that part. But then, actually, if you go to the preview, you're gonna see that when I preview the page here, it actually has nothing because it's only an empty div tag. But here, it actually loads the entire page with a bunch of data and text on it. That's the power of SSR, meaning that there is a thing for SEO, for example, that it's SEO friendly because Google has a thing called crawling budget that is explained here on this Spotify article, and you can see it, that Google actually crawls your page 2 times And the first time it only renders like the HTML, and then it actually goes to your page afterwards, and then it runs the JS, meaning that it has to go to your page 2 times in order to actually get what is here. But in our case, we actually only have to, Google only has to go to our web page as we are using Next.js for the first time to get the meaningful data out of it. And as you guys can probably see here, that the page is blazing fast. If you re-render it and it loads the static or the server-side data actually out of the box, and then it comes with the other parts. And I'm going to explain why we do it in the next parts. Then we have a curse that is server-side. Let's see why. A few metrics for blockchain.com for the Explorer is that we have 10 million page views per month, and actually that's a lot. And you usually have like 1,000 to 2,000 people looking at Explorer at once, always. And we have over 800 billion in crypto transactions. And let's talk a little bit about the Explorer. Is the main source for Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Ethereum transactions on the web. So if you go to the page and then you go see here the latest blocks in the latest transactions, you're gonna see that it's pretty fast the way that it goes back and forward. And today, if you send Bitcoin to someone and you want to see the status of that transaction, you would probably come to blockchain.com. For OGs is blockchain.info. We changed the name. And we are basically the main source. If you search for Bitcoin Explorer on Google, we're going to probably be the first ones. Or Ethereum is the same thing. So if you go to our web page, and then you're going to see that we have a lot of information here that is actually computed. So we end with different sources, meaning that we don't fetch everything from one endpoint. We actually fetch several different endpoints, and we calculate a bunch of things to serve this page to you. So we have a few problems here, right? So the first problem is that as we have a lot of users and everything was on the server, we didn't only give to the client the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then the client would render the whole page. We render it on the server, and we had a lot of, we have many requests at a time, meaning that we would use a lot of CPU to render that page, and a lot of things here, they are considered CPU heavy data to do, like crypto decrypting and things like that. So with high costs, computation heavy data with high traffic, you have a node that is single threaded. And this may be controversial, but the single threaded thing of Node.js is not that it only uses one CPU, is that in our case that we had not long tasks, like we didn't have long tasks to run. It's only the user go to our website, then we render the HTML for him, and we get all the data and give it to them. What happens is that Node doesn't use all its cores to actually respond to the users. One core could ask a child core to compute something, but it wasn't optimized for our case. And we had everything on the server. So if you go here, what we had in the past was that everything that you see on this page, the charts, the latest blocks, the estimated hash rate, transactions per in the last 24 hours, transaction volume, everything was rendered on the server. So we had to compute everything on the server. And if you search for SSR cons, you will find out that if you have like big chunky applications, thick applications, you're gonna have some problems on the server. And one thing that probably Cassidy will like, it's gonna be in on one of the last slides. That's the solution, other than the whole thing that we're gonna say about here, is one quick solution to use Next.js. But how we fix it, like how we have now this page that actually is way faster and way cheaper to run, using Next.js, having all the benefits of having this server-side render thing, and how we did it. Basically, what we did was we replaced the under the hood that I said that we use Express, because Next.js gives you an API route that basically lets you do some API things with serverless. And what we did was we replaced it with Fastify to make it faster for a few cases, because some requests that we do here, they come directly to our API endpoint, and we would need to calculate a bunch of things and then return it. And for these things, we saw that Fastify performed way better. So we use Fastify on the API part, and actually there is a Fastify Next.js part on Fastify that you can check and use. It's pretty straightforward and really easy to use. The next thing is we made the application stateless. This is a little bit more technical, but if you go to Explorer now, and if you click on Ethereum Explorer, for example, what happens is that we don't care about your last request. So if you refresh the page here, you're going to see the same page, meaning that if you go to a stateful application and you go to Bitcoin Explorer here and it wouldn't change the URL, if you make the same request to a different server, because that is not a fact that I'm looking for these things on different servers, what would happen is that it could be that a different server would render this page for me, and it would render the wrong page. So to make it with cluster mode, using different CPUs to different requests, you have to make it stateless. So we made it with cluster mode with multiple instances. And the funny part of it is that we were checking like how to do it, because we had like pretty thick servers running our application. And it was 25 servers running this application. And we would check the metrics, and we would see that we use like 100% of one CPU, and then the other CPUs were all at 1-2% of usage. And we had like servers with 32 cores, and we weren't using them basically. So what we did was like I got the task to like fix it, and basically I tried to search for it, and the only place where I could find something about it was on this discussion on the Next.js that was of last year, where the guy said that it didn't work with the cluster mode, and then Tim, one of the creators of Next.js, he like explained how it would work and gave the instructions to make it work. So it's pretty nice that like this response from him was better than 99% of all the articles that I saw about it. And then we client-sided what we could. So one of the reasons why we use Next.js is because it's SEO friendly, and we would like to let Google know that we have this data as soon as it needs to. Meaning that the only thing that would be crawlable and useful for Google actually would be the, let's try again one more time. Yeah, it worked. Here, the only thing that would be crawlable by Google and useful would be the price that was computed. And the rest actually is not crawlable or neither useful for Google because it was real-time data. This data changes in a matter of seconds. And Google, to this day, doesn't render charts and doesn't crawl charts to show them on the search. So what we did was we let Google and the search engines get what was useful, like the texts and what the page was about, and we client-sided everything else that actually was not crawlable. So now you see that we have some loaders, and then it's kind of an hybrid approach where some data that has to fetch different sources and has to compute some things, we do it on the client and not on the server. And the results are pretty funny. First of all, we improved our response time in 90+%, meaning that if today in the rush day, the response time recorded is 150 milliseconds. In the past, it was like when Elon Musk said something about Bitcoin and everyone wanted to know about the Bitcoin Explorer, we had a lot of access, and the response time could be way higher. And then we decreased the amount of servers needed. I said it earlier on this talk that actually we had 25 servers on running this application, and now I think we have like 4 running it with multiple cores, and it's running smoothly. The costs reduced more than 80%. So like for a thing that like used to cost like a lot of money, now it's reasonable, and we can actually make people that handle money like happy. And this is actually something that our CTO said, because after we did it, this was actually the response time because we were throttling on the CPUs. So when the first CPU would get 100%, what would happen is that it would throttle, so it would take more time for the following to respond. And then this is after we implemented it. It's almost like a flat line. And the message says it all. Like, he thought that we turned it off just because we optimized it so much that he couldn't see the response time afterwards. And I have a few tips for people that want to do it. That is what probably Cassidy will talk about. So if you want to use it and you don't have an IT SRA team as we do, maybe use serverless. It is optimized for that. You wouldn't have any of these issues if you'd use it. So please, if you don't have the budget or the need to have your own server, please use serverless. And another one is don't use all your cores. Actually, on the PM2 cluster mode, it talks about using instances max or things like -1. But yeah, don't do that because Node actually uses one of the, when you use it like this, one of the cores is used to load balance between them. And here, -1. And I discover it on the on the hard way, because if you see here, there is a big part of the chart here that was, we're using all the cores. We had the same problem that we had before, because there was not one core to actually load balance the things. So don't use them all. And yeah, basically that's it. The end part is that if you really need to have your own server, then use it with multiple cores. But if you don't, use serverless and be happy. And by the way, we are hiring at blockchain.com. So if you want to be part of it and build nice things with crypto, please talk to us. We have several positions open. And this is my GitHub and Twitter. And that's all. Hit me up with some questions.
Yes, so let's get to comments and discuss what we have. So first one, does the server cost differ on server-side rendering? So when I think there's some difference, right? When you start doing SSR.
Yeah, there's a different there are different ways. I think I that's what I got from your question. There are different ways to do it. There is the SSR, where you could on each request the server would get the data for you. There is the SSG, that is server-side generated, where on build time you generate the whole thing and then you just present it. And then there's the client, as client rendered, where you fetch something and then what it gives you is just a bunch of JavaScript and an empty HTML, and the client renders everything. And there is this hybrid way that actually you render a few parts on the server and a few parts on the client to make it more optimized.
Yeah, I mean, in my personal work, I have found webhooks quite useful. So you have one source of data, and then you have the static side somewhere, and then you trigger the static side build with webhooks. You could even do this with Next.js if you wanted, if the use case fits. Next, caching and SSR.
All right. So in our case, that's interesting part. In our case, we didn't cache much, right? Because we had a lot of server-side, we had a lot of real-time data. So if you actually go to the web page now and in a few minutes, it's going to be totally different. And then on the server part, there is a Redis thing that is actually triggered on the build time, where we have Redis is basically it's kind of like a database as an object with key value pairs that you only have simple data on it. So it really loads really fast if you need it. And we do it for the part that is basically text. So everything that we render before that, it's kind of already cached if you need to. So if you go to the web page the first time, you're gonna see everything new. And if you go there then the second time and we didn't trigger any other build, then you're gonna see actually the same thing, just with one change, that is the price, that is actually server-sided, and then the rest is actually cached. All
right. I guess the next one about Kubernetes. So when using Kubernetes, it's not recommended to use PM2. Maybe you have some insight on this topic.
Oh, sure. And actually, let me just say one thing. We use PM2 because it was the easier way in the first approach. Kubernetes, you can make one Docker image and make a lot of Docker images in the same server, and this would work the same way as we do here. And actually, we have a Docker instantiator that I didn't show, but I think that's not something that a lot of people would like to see. That is just an initiator on a cluster mode that is called on Docker. So if you do it with Kubernetes, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to run a bunch of applications depending on the amount of cores that you have and the power of your machine on your server. and you're gonna basically run the same application like in several different times, and you would let Kubernetes like handle this this, how's it called? Yeah, the load balancing. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So I think I have one more question. If anyone has any questions, just send them through YouTube chat or so, and I will just bring them up here. So then we have a question about React server components. Do you think they will help in the future with this kind of problems and the server cost?
Yeah. My guts tell me to make a joke about suspense, but I'm not. So yeah,
Don't keep us in suspense.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, what happens is that if you render everything on the server, you can have the same thing, the same issue, because it can happen that you render everything on the server and just give to the client what it has to show. So if you like do computer heavy stuff on the server and you have a lot of you have many users at the same time and you have to do it all on the server, you're gonna have problems. Like that's the thing with it. The server, the amount of servers is not the same amount of clients that you have. So for one client it's easy to fetch like 1 megabyte of data for a certain case, but for a server to do it like 1,000 times in like 1 second is not very good. So yeah, it's gonna be the same thing, I guess.
I will say with the server components, it doesn't have to be just for server-side rendering. You can pre-build a lot of your sites with server components. And I've seen some really interesting demos where people are just like, yes, we're able to server-side render, but also just pre-builds sites as much as possible, where you build as much as you can up front and then render other things later, which will be able to help in terms of the load problem. But
right.
it's still very early with all of it anyway. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I did something like this a couple of years back for my static site generators. The point was to divide interactive portions of the site, and then in these interactive portions, I generated a bundle, like with Preact or something. It was super light, so you have like these sites, like tiny widgets on a page where you actually execute the code. And it worked well. But of course, it has its limitations. But it's sort of React code up, so I can throw this idea to garbage and use React server components in the future. So that's cool. Any other ideas or any other discussion on the topic in mind, or should we move to the next demonstration? We can discuss more later. So I guess it's David's turn. So maybe David can get ready, and we move to the next demonstration. So we need your screen. And here we go. The stage is yours.
All right. Well, very insightful, this or server-side rendering stuff. I have a little bit of server-side rendering too, but only a little bit. As you might guess, when we're doing applications for a client, most of them need some kind of authentication, because most of the stuff is not for the public. And as we explored Next.js in the past, we needed to come up with a solution for that. So today I want to show you a little bit about NextAuth.js, which we are using in our projects lately. And therefore a very simple passwordless flow using email. I've done a little bit of preparation. I've spinned up a Postgres database with Hasura to store some user data and stuff like that. I have a Mailtrap account set up because I need an SMTP server. So let's just dive right in. I have one protected page here let's just click on that, and you can see that the access is denied because I must be signed in to view this page. Let's have a look at the code. What NextAuth is doing for us, it give us this use session hook, which returns a current session object or null. So it's very easy to check if a user is logged in or not. So if the user is not logged in, I can show him an access denied. Yeah, so let's just log in. Then check your email. The sign-in link is provided. This is also something NextAuth.js is doing for you if you want to use their pages, or you can overwrite them and have your own style. So a few seconds later, I get this email with a sign-in link. And when I click on it, I'm back on the same page, on the protected page, but now I'm logged in and can see protected content. Yeah. I can also see that some remote data is fetched here, which is shown here. So on the server side, you can use this get session function NextAuth is providing to do the same thing, getting back a session. And if there's a session object, then there's a user present, there's a user logged in, and you can return content or send an error. Right. Next up, let's have a look here. Most of the time you need some information about the user, like the email address or the name, to show them in a header or something like that. And it's very easy to build this because you can get the session object and then just return it to your client and use it however you like. All right. There's something on the I want to show you at the cookie stage here, because this whole thing works with a cookie flow, and there's also one thing that is very
Can you make it a little bit bigger so we can see?
Bigger?
Yeah.
Better this way?
Yeah, that's good.
There is this cross-site request forgery token given. It is used for the whole login and logout flow, but you can also use it for other form posts you do in applications. And it is checked to mitigate cross-site request forgery attacks. Yeah, so let's have a look at my little server-side rendering thing I did here. The code here. Like in the API routes, you can use the get session function to get the session object, and in this case, I just return it to the client, to the render process, and use it somehow here. But this is very convenient for static generation, stuff like that. Yeah. So then maybe I can show you a little bit about the magic or behind. This is happening in route Auth, NextAuth. This is something NextAuth, this is required that it is here. Yeah, and you can basically configure the providers. I have this email provider here. You need a database URL for the users to be stored, and a secret. This is those three things are the minimum. The secret is used to secure to sign the cookie. Yeah, but NextAuth, and we can have a look here, the documentation, make it a little bit bigger. Supports, okay, this is too big. A vast majority of OAuth providers. So, for example, we use Keycloak. It's an open source identity and access management tool in with NextAuth. Yeah.
Can you show the Hasura portion of the setup? Because we have the database connected to this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. This script I have here is something that is provided by Next.js. So you can just copy and paste it, and I have this this user table here where I'm present right now. Yeah, maybe this is something very interesting. When someone first uses your sign-up process, the email address is added to verification requests, and you have hooks where you can react on, fun intended, on certain requests and maybe get some spam database and check if the email address is any good before you really let him or her log into your application. This is something we do on some public applications we have, for example.
All right.
Right. So good so far.
Yep. Did you have any other things to show, or I guess we move to discussion, right? So discussion about authentication and Next.js. So what are your experiences in general? Like I have used the Next.js in one, or this NextAuth in one project. We ended up using Auth0 with it, and it was quite easy and fast to use.
I mean, we literally tried everything because it's beta, this whole thing.
Yeah.
We tried a proxy in front of, but using a proxy with Next.js is like losing a lot of its benefits. So this is something we do on several projects at ATM, but it's like, yeah. And so we're exploring solutions like NextAuth, and we want to keep things simple for us. I mean, they do all the heavy lifting. As you've seen, there's not a lot of code. There's not a lot of to do as a developer. Yeah, it just works almost out of the box. And that's something I admire, because I can focus on important stuff. And when we had projects years ago, where we like worked a month only to get all this login and stuff up and running. And now I can spin this up in like 2 hours. It's very, very cool.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes. Let's take this one first, and then we go to yours. So is there a simple way to add basic auth to some routes in Next.js? I guess.
To be honest, I never did this before. I would just get all the headers and check for the basic auth. Probably.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah.
The most basic example I've ever done, and full disclosure, I work at Netlify, so I use Netlify Identity, and I was able to make just like a 2-page app where there was the public page and the private page, and just adding their little identity widget that authed it, and I think it used JWT tokens for it. I wrote a blog on it somewhere, and I can try to find it if that would be helpful.
Cool. Yeah, so it sounds like there's a simple way just to find the npm package or so, or write find a bit of code. Pedro, you have some idea?
Yeah, because like, am I muted? No. One thing that like I always have to check on these things is that, as I work at a company that has a wallet for crypto, like security is a thing that like bothers me every day. Did you find anything that like what was the hardest part for you to implement something like this on the page? Like, what are the some stuff to look for when you implement an authentication? A possible way to prevent other people to access that thing to you. What are your tips for that?
Okay. My first tip would be use some ready-made solutions like Auth0 because they know how to do things like that, or Netlify Identity or something like that. Don't spin up your own username password solution. It's prone to attacks. We did this before, and then you get into this whole rabbit hole with cross-site request forgery tokens. Then you read all the OWASP stuff, and you get really scared about everything there. And that's why we decided, okay, our strengths are somewhere else. Let's settle with ready-made solutions. And I would really say that everyone should do this. If I don't know, I mean, I can't imagine any scenario where it's really necessary to build this stuff or on your own.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, but my feeling is that when it comes to authentication, we're slowly moving to like two-way authentication or to links instead of passwords within the magic link. Mm-hmm. Is this something you see as well, or?
Yeah, we enforce this actually because we have seen a lot of people using very, very weak passwords in the past, or sharing passwords, sharing accounts. I mean, we have applications where the password is password1 and they have it on a post-it on the monitor. Yeah, I mean, I've seen all these things, and then that's why we try to move into passwordless authentication, email flows, two-factor authentication, to have an easy flow, but also secure one. And we're trying to enforce it more. People don't like passwords.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, there is a comment. Pedro and Cassidy were nodding when David said, "Don't use a proxy in front of Next.js." So can you expand on that?
Okay. I'm in no means a real expert on this topic. I read all the stuff on the Next.js blog about it. You lose some of this all static optimization stuff, some of this server-side rendering stuff. I mean, Pedro, maybe you are better suited to answer this question.
Yeah, I'm not the one that works at a serverless company here, but I can answer this one. Actually, Next.js was created to be used as it is. So it was created to be used you just pop it up on Netlify or Vercel or whatever, and then it just works. So there are a bunch of optimizations that happen out of the box there. So when you talk about proxying something, you would have the same issues that we had. That is, you lose, for example, the caching that actually Next.js gives you, because there is a flag on their config, for example, that lets you enable and disable caching depending on what you have. And if you insert a proxy and you said about Nginx, for example, there are a bunch of articles explaining how and why you should use Nginx with a few other configurations, because it could be that you render the first time authenticated, but then you render the second time, and if you cache it, depending on where you cache it with authentication, you get an authenticated session, but you're not actually that person. So yeah, there are a few things that you have to care about when you use when you want to customize the Next.js way to do things.
It's always caching problems. That's the summary.
Yeah.
Naming
Yeah,
and
or DNS.
Yeah,
Yeah.
always one of those.
Cool. So, I guess we're all ready for the last demonstration by Cassidy. I think it's time for you to get ready, and we move on to the demonstration. Sure.
All right. So I'm very happy to show this demo here. This is something that I actually first built around Halloween time, which is why it's all spooky. But it's something that I've updated and played around with, and it kind of illustrates a few cool concepts in Next.js. And so this is a lonely code-filled night. If you'd like to run it yourself, I have it on cast.run/adventure, and I'm putting that in our chat so that we can share it in here. But what it is a state machine driven crowdsourced choose your own adventure story. And so there's a lot of little things built in here. Yeah, this. Okay. So with this story, you can either click get spooky or contribute a character. I'm going to do get stories or get spooky so that way you can see. So when I click that, we then get into our story. Once upon a time, there was a developer named Fishy who was working very late at night on Halloween. It's snack time. Fishy took a break, decided to take a break to get a snack. They went to the kitchen, couldn't decide what to eat. So we're starting to just navigate the story here. We can either eat an apple or eat some candy. I'm going to eat some candy because I like candy. They munched on the candy, enjoying a delightful thought of getting a cavity someday, but then the doorbell rang. Trick or treat echoed outside. We answered the door. They answered the front door, but there was nobody there. It was spooky, probably a good thing since their stomach had the last of the candy. We'll ask if anyone was out there. They called out into the night. Who's there? Suddenly a werewolf comes up and says, have you heard of TypeScript? And eats them. The end. So that's our very, very spooky story. And thank you for your laughs. Thank you. And so the story goes through all kinds of different paths that you can navigate and play around with stuff. And I'll get into how that was built. And if you go home, you'll notice that the character had kind of a fishy name. And that is because it came from users. And so you can actually contribute a character where you put in the name, their pronouns, their favorite smell. That comes at a later part in the story if you get to that part of the story. And then your email in there. And when you fill this out, then you can kind of populate the story with your own characters that are then randomly added to this story here. So anyway, that is the app, and now I'm going to kind of take you through it so you can see more of it. So here is how it is built. We have a few small things that are added to the dependencies. First of all, we have XState, which is driving the state machine behind the Choose Your Own Adventure story. We're using Next and Next. I mean, we're talking about Next. You don't need to know that. Next and React. XState is installed again. We've got the React wrapper for it, and then Node Fetch for all of the serverless sides of things. So first of all, I'll talk about contributing a character. Now, there are two serverless functions that are run for characters in general. Now, there's submission created, which takes in the entire form that I made in there, and it gets the name, the gender, and the smell, and then it adds the character to a Hasura database. And this is a GraphQL mutation that is passed to a database, and I'm going to show it really quick over here. We have a bunch of characters, and some people got a little snarky using like use character name, and then their favorite smell is state machines. But there's some amusing characters that people have passed into the form. Now, the form name file is called submission created, and this is actually a magic name, and that's just the way Netlify works, where if you create a form, and in this case, I created this character form here, if you add data Netlify is true, Netlify will automatically capture all of your submissions for you and run any serverless functions named submission-created.js whenever a form is submitted with this attribute. And so because I put data Netlify is true, that means submission-created.js is run whenever the form is submitted. And so I'm able to do whatever I want with the data. And in this particular case, I'm adding it to the Hasura database. So it's a nice little simple thing there. When I first discovered this, I was like, really? And it saves me so much time and energy. So anyway, that's adding the character, and then we also get the character. And so getting the character, it's similar. I'm getting the character from the database with a GraphQL query, and then I populate it. I get a random character from the database here, and then I populate my story with it elsewhere. And so that is the serverless part of the entire application. And so now let's talk about the actual story itself, because I kind of just showed you the form already. That is that side of it. For the actual story itself, I put this into a giant React context. And this is a big state machine that I made with XState, where I went through a whole level of stories where there's the start and the kitchen snack time, then there's the first level, the second level, and the third level, and it's kind of just a big tree state machine that goes through all of this. And I didn't actually run it before this, but with XState, what's really nice about it is it has a visualizer, so you can kind of see, okay, what happens when I click this? What options do I have? What happens when I click on this? What options do I have? And it lets you kind of branch out and figure out where in your story you're going. And so I have all of these levels defined, and then when you get to each of these levels, it returns a certain aspect of the story. And so we're getting the character, the name, pronouns, and smell that I mentioned before from the form, and then we're populating it with this random character's attributes. And so this is creating, I called it a story machine, and then it's just this gigantic blob where it generates pronouns, it passes in all the details, and then it creates a state machine at the very bottom of this. And with the generating pronouns, I was kind of proud of this. They're very simple functions, but basically it generates all the different pronouns for the characters, depending on if they're masculine, feminine, or non-binary. And so it kind of made things easy to draft the story together that way. So that is the state machine portion of it, and then we pass all of that in to a React context right here. And so in here, we in my context, I have a use effect that queries my get character function, and I use the full URL because I'm querying the live one, especially for when I'm running things locally. I want it to pull from the live database. And then once I set the character and everything and use random character, I basically pass all of this to the state machine. And then the value of the state machine is passed to the context. And then the context wraps the application so that I can pass it to the rest of the application. And so that's that part. And so this story context, it's going into the _app.js that is passed around that, and that's where that goes. And what's also cool about this is the way I do routing for the story. And so my default routes or my base routes are the index.js, where it's just like a lonely code-filled night. That's what you see right here. This is all the index.js is. There's the make your own character, which has the character form, and then it's just your turn, add a character. There's a success when you submit the form. There's a success page. And then the rest is in this folder called S. And it's hard to see the file name in here. I can try to zoom in a lot, but it's these brackets and then ... story.js inside of there. And let me zoom back so you can actually see the code a little bit. So inside of this is where the whole routing magic happens. And so Next.js is very good at routing in between all of these different things, whether it's server-side or statically generated, which we've talked about a lot today already. But what it also can do is shallow routing. And so the entire story is just done in this one route page, where because it has the brackets and then the ... story, it's a dynamic route that can have as many paths as you want in it. And so as I navigate through the story and click on all of these different things, it's kind of hard to see, but the URL, I'll just paste it in the chat and you can see what it looks like. It goes start and then snack time and then eat some candy. And it goes through all of those different routes on there. And it doesn't actually make any special queries whenever I navigate that, but I can see my point in the story based on the route. And so you can kind of see that there. We've got the start, snack time, eat some candy. And so you can see which path you took throughout the story. And so what I do is I, again, use the app context to get the character that I need. I pull in my state machine, and I also get use router, so that way I can push these routes. And so inside of here, I check state and next events, and so I'm querying XState and getting all of the XState events that happen. And then whenever I hit restart, for example, it pushes it to the start of the story. But then otherwise, it gives me the actual event type and the route as path, and so that's the actual states of the story, and that kind of drives where we go in the state machine, and it also shows that in the URL as well. And I don't need to make new queries every single time, because the shallow routing, it's kind of like client-side routing almost, where it just does it in place while still changing the URL, so that way there's some kind of state in the user's mind without actually having to navigate away. And that's kind of it, honestly. This is a very serverless one. Like if you look at my next config, it's just the target serverless and everything. And so I queries some serverless things. But besides that, I don't have a node server running on this. I think the most of my configs is just absolute paths. So that way we can not have to do like the ... // for getting individual components that you tend to see in a lot of applications. And then in my deploy config, I basically run build, and then my functions folder is functions, my publish directory is out, and that is what runs to deploy all of this to Netlify. And that is the whole application. It was a really fun one to build, and once again, if you'd like to check it out, it's open source, cassidy/nextadventure, or you could do cas.run/adventure. That's the shortcode for it, and so you can actually play with the demo, or you could just go through the code and see how it was built for yourself. And that's that.
Yeah, great. I guess now it's time to discuss a tiny bit. So we move to the discussion and see if people have anything to ask or so. Thank you for the demonstration.
I have one thing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, how did you, the first one is a joke. How did you say state machines more than 3 times without David K appearing here?
Oh, believe me, he appeared the first time I demoed this. When I was making this around Halloween, I was like, ooh, state machines. And then he was suddenly in the chat like, hello, you rang?
Yeah, he always appears. But the second thing is that what was because I saw that you used the shallow routes. It was just for the user to see his route, or if you refresh that page there, it continues to where exactly you were.
Yeah, and so that was mostly just for the user. If you actually go to one of those routes and it says, wait a minute, you're not at the start of the story, it will redirect you to the start of the story. And so that's mostly just for your own record, and you can hit back and go to an earlier part of the story, and that's part of it too. But if you go just to that route, like if you were to just click on a link to it, it won't work, and that's on purpose.
All right, nice.
All right, so we have really silent audience at the moment.
It's okay.
So, but yeah, that's Finnish audience. I hope there are actually people from abroad as well, but yeah, you never know. So you can maybe I show the links and put them to chat as well. So we have the authentication demonstration is available. I will put this to chat as well, so you can access.
David, I saw that you unmuted too. Did you want to say something?
Oh no. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. It's fine. Then we have SSR optimization app, and then we have guide to authentication. So let's see. I will put them to chat, and I guess the last thing to do is to have discuss takeaways. What did you pick up from the session, or learn, or did something pop up or come to mind?
I always like just seeing how other people are using it, because I admit I like to do kind of silly demos like this one just because it's more fun. But seeing the practical side of things, it's always good to see that, to figure out how can I make this more accessible for others. And so seeing the authentication story, seeing the SSR story in a different light has been super interesting.
Yeah.
For me, it's funny to see like big state machines like that, and how actually, because if you give me a task to create a graph database to actually do something like that, like it's pretty, like, I don't know other way to do it right now. I would probably search for like graph databases and how to do it. I wouldn't go to state machines because I don't know, I'm not educated enough to go for this one, but this is a very nice approach for that.
Yeah, and even for non-silly choose your own adventure stories, I think state machines are so powerful for, especially if you're building some kind of library and you have all of these different routes for how a user can take a certain component or how they can do something. Even for a checkbox, like, okay, they just click on it. What if they click and drag on it? What if they do this, do that? And coming up with all the different use cases, it's very, very powerful to have that as a way of navigating a code base.
Yeah, I think that too, because when we start applications, they usually are more simple, the flows, but then this feature is added and this feature is added and there's a feature added, and especially XState with the visualizer is a very, very powerful way to also discuss with a client how a workflow is supposed to work.
Yeah.
And it's super convenient. I really love it. It's really, really nice. So it was also really nice to see it in a non-business context. It's very funny. And I really liked... sorry, Pedro?
No, yeah, one thing that I really liked was that, like, if you can, in a certain way, on this Next.js talk that we are giving, is that, like, the way that you can work with state machines and having it authenticated is pretty much like a lot of the sales funnels that you do. For example, on any company that you have like the first one is your cart, the second one is you have to log in and etc. And the third one is the checkout. Probably, David, you had to do it more than like anyone else here. So to use state machines to like give to this flow actually more ways to, all right, what if the person is from a country that it doesn't need to create a user, or what if it's for someone that is the same city, so it just can grab the item there. So to do it with like authenticating depending on the way, it's pretty very nice insight on what you can do with it.
It's also very convenient to find dead ends in your flow.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or loops, where people might end up in an infinite loop,
Yeah.
which is a different kind of dead end.
Yeah.
I will say one thing that I don't like about Next.js, because there are a lot of things to like. One thing I don't like about Next.js is how they share state across routes in general. Because, for example, wrapping the context around the _app.js, that gives all of the routes access to that state machine, which is what I wanted in this application. But if I were building a much larger application with many different types of stories or something like that, you basically have to share it across all routes or no routes. There's no way to just say, I would just want 3 of these files in my pages folder to have access to an amount of state. And that's something that I think like React Router does a good job of, but again, that's client-side routing. And so I think that's something I'd like to improve in Next.js.
Yeah. One thing that I got like, and that I liked a lot, is that I was asked a few days ago about, like, for a simple page, what you should do for Next.js. Like, we use Tailwind for a project I was doing, and it's a personal project actually. And we used Tailwind, and we had a form on the footer. And that's just one thing that I would like to ask more about it, because it's so convenient, because the other implementations of forms, it's so complicated to implement it. and I saw Netlify forms, and I didn't know how to implement it, and seeing it now, it's so dumb that I didn't think about it before. So, like how it works, like how it gets, it only works if you are on a Netlify, using Netlify, or it works if you work on a different server, how it works?
It has to be on Netlify because it's Netlify detecting the form. That being said, if you wanted to, for example, break up your site, a lot of our customers, they actually do microsites where they break up different parts of their site that way. And so you could theoretically make a microsite where your form lives and that part lives on Netlify, and then all of the form stuff can happen there. We have some customers where they have like 120 microsites, and most of them are on Netlify, some of them are on AWS, some of them do this and that, but then they're all just hooked up together with redirects and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, but when I discovered Netlify forms, it was a game changer because of like old PHP days and stuff where you wanted to pull in all the forms. The fact that it's literally an attribute and then a serverless function, it's game changer for me.
I used it to add a little contact form on a page, and it was like done in 5 minutes. It was mind-blowing. It was really good.
Yeah, and you can, in the Netlify UI itself, you can just download a CSV of all of the entries, or you can, again, put it in a database, add it to some kind of database yourself outside of Netlify, or whatever you'd like.
All right, so I have one question. You can actually ask more questions if anyone has something on mind, but so how would you compare Next.js and Next.js? So I don't know Next.js, but I know it's for Vue. But what's the difference? I mean, it looks similar, but I guess it's a different thing.
Next is to React as Next is to Vue. That's the high-level summary.
And I think that, like, does Next has a company behind it, or is all community?
It's all community based. I know, like, we, for example, as a company, we sponsor it, and they do a lot of really big sponsorships and stuff that help them drive it.
Cool. Because, like, there are a few different implications of it, but it's always nice to see, like, that we have different, as we do with this Svelte now that has a Svelte kit. They have, like, the same thing, but they didn't create the Next or something like that. It would be way better because the name.
Yeah, so there is a Next company. That's fresh news for us. So there's a company and they hired a team, or a team. So it's sort of it's interesting with
I
this.
didn't see that.
And they got some funding, so they have some dollars to use.
Really?
Well, how about
I
that?
didn't know that.
Yeah. Cool. It's some kind of a trend that the open source projects, they get tons of funding and they make business out of it. That didn't happen so much 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
I mean, cool to imagine JavaScript framework that gets tens of millions of dollars of funding. I mean,
it's wild to see, honestly.
Yeah, it's really.
But at the same time, it's nice, right? Because then they can continue, like, building it, and they continue, like, growing it. But it's always, like, hard to imagine how a person would profit from the framework. It's
you have to build a service around it or lead people to something else.
Or like, I mean, for me as a business owner, frameworks like this are saving me real money because everything is really smooth and I can get up and running really quick, and that is saving me money. So I can totally see why these frameworks like Nuxt or Next have companies behind and get some money to play with. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That there's a real business case, and I'm totally paying for frameworks too. So.
Yeah, there are the two ways, right? There is like Next.js. I don't know which was created first. It was like Next or Now, but then you have this one that I think that one was created around the other. And then you have like Netlify, for example, that has like Netlify Forms, Netlify CMS. that is like a company that creates these apps for like open source and for free. Like they're the two ways of creating these awesome things. I think that like we are on the approach of building it around on the Next.
It's interesting to see because Next does that Next and the Vercel team, Gatsby, and then the Gatsby company.
Yeah,
and
Gatsby.
You see that a lot, and from our perspective, and I'm not trying to be a shill for Netlify, but I can just speak to it. We try to be as framework agnostic as possible. And an example of this, I saw someone said like, oh, we hope that Netlify supports SSR as well. Technically, if you want to do SSR with Next, you can. We'll just render it via serverless functions, and so that's a whole thing. But one example in Next where it's like kind of SSR but kind of not is ISR, their incremental static regeneration approach, and it first started coming out last year, and it's been an interesting way of seeing how it's caching again, where you build a site mostly, and then you have pages that are loaded on demand, but then they're added to a build with a cache later and everything, and it's a really interesting approach, and there are pros and cons to it, and I can link another blog post that I wrote about the pros and cons of ISR. But one thing that has been really interesting for us to do internally, it's my URL shortener again, cast.run/ISR. We've been trying to figure out how can we take this approach and apply it to all frameworks, and what way can we do that. And so we recently put out an RFC for distributed persistent building or distributed persistent rendering, which is very similar to ISR, but with a different caching approach. And I could put this link for it here. Oops, sorry, my paste didn't work there. That one. And with this distributed persistent rendering, it's the concept of being able to do this kind of incremental rendering for all frameworks. So you could use it with Next, you could use it with Gatsby, with Next, with Eleventy, with Hugo, with all of these different things.
All those advanced features are really challenging because most of the applications we are hosting by ourselves on an OpenShift cluster, and we basically have to rebuild some of those things so that we can use SSR and stuff like that. And that's sometimes really challenging.
Yeah, it's hard to incrementally adopt different frameworks. And especially something like Next, where they have their whole routing system in place kind of just for Next. And if you wanted to do a different base route for internationalization, that can get pretty challenging if you want like some of that to be in a different framework or approach, and then some of it just with Next itself. And they do a good job, but it's not an incredible flawless job, and that's because it's a hard problem to solve.
It's funny to see that, for example, I saw an article about incremental like ISR, and it's like one store that took like 2 hours to build the whole thing because they had like millions of products. So with ISR, they could like launch a new product in 2 minutes and not like one day. It was like a pretty big thing.
Yeah, we've been taking this distributed persistent rendering approach and applying it to Next and seeing how it'll affect things. Nice. The sites that we've tried it with aren't nearly as big, but we had one where it was like a 4-minute build, and then it was down to 10 seconds, and it was amazing. And so that kind of stuff, it's a very, very cool way to see how these sites can get really, really large. Large scale media sites for sure. And this is another shill. I'm speaking at a conference later today where I'm going a much deeper dive into this exact topic of caching for large sites. And so if anybody's interested, I can post a link to the conference I'm speaking at later. It's free. And it's mostly for e-commerce sites specifically and really large sites with that, but it's a similar approach.
Yeah, I was just posted. I hope people find it. Yeah, it's really interesting because all the conferences, they somehow went online. I've never seen so many online conferences than this or last year.
Yeah, it's been a busy day or year, century, it feels like.
Yeah, it's been a long day. Yeah, so I guess, do you have any other thoughts on the topic, or do you want to discuss anything, or should I go to sauna? What do you think?
Thank you for having us. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Pedro. Go ahead.
No, I think that like the only thing that now I would like to ask is that, like, you talked about internationalization, and now I want to know, like, what's your approach for internationalization, Cassidy, and everyone here actually that, like, I think that only Cassidy has English as her mother tongue. I think that everyone else is, like, speaks another language and has to like translate websites like daily. How's your approaches for internationalization on Next.js?
I don't use the built-in Next.js internationalization yet. And that's not meant as a slight to the framework. I just think it's not as established yet. And so I tend to use other libraries for it.
I didn't even know that they had it.
Yeah, that's how new it is.
We are using the built-in functionality for our website. So I want to explore it if it's feasible for our applications. But in our applications, we're using React Intel. I don't know if you know this library.
Yes.
And all the stuff around, because we want to have an extra file with all the translations we can give to an agency to translate it to other languages and get it back.
Right.
Now
there's a last minute question about roadmap of Next.js. What's in store for the next release? Do you know what's coming up, or?
I don't think they publicize that much.
Yeah.
Like luckily they do have a discussion section of their repo, and they do have like a Discord community that you can join too. And so, for example, on our team, we recently submitted a discussion topic like, please include the picture tag for next image, because right now it doesn't support it, and little things like that. But I think that's in the hands of Vercel, where the framework goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if you don't have a public roadmap, then people cannot be disappointed. It's like with React and suspense, and we're still waiting. So it's sort of, it's better to wait. But yeah. Thanks for the demonstrations. It was great to have you in the session. For the next month, we're going to discuss design tools. So it's going to be a little bit different topic, but I think we will enjoy it a lot. And I hope you have a nice summer, and maybe we'll see one day. So
yes, oh, that'd be great someday.
Someday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.